Hello, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. Today is a very exciting video because I'm going to be talking about some of my 5-star reads. Now, I've said I was going to do this video for ages and I just haven't gotten around to it, and is this the third time I filmed this video? Yes. Are we going to talk about it? No. So I got back into reading in 2022, and since then I've read 96 books, and out of those 96 books I've had 9 5-star reads. So I'm quite picky with my 5-star reads. It's about 1 in every 10 books or so that I rate a book 5 stars. I don't really give many books 5 stars, but when I do, it's because I absolutely love it. Because I want to properly talk about these books and properly explain why I love them, I thought I would make this a little bit of a series. So today is part 1, where I'm going to be talking about the first 5 books that I ever rated 5 stars. And then in another video, I would then do the following 5 books that I rated 5 stars. I've only rated 9 books 5 stars so far, so once I've found my 10th 5-star read, I will be making a part 2 to this video where I'll then talk about the other 5 books that I've rated 5 stars, if that makes sense. But yeah, so today I'm just going to be talking about the first 5 books that I rated 5 stars, and honestly, when I looked at this list, I really realised how basic my taste is. I would say all of these books are viral books that you probably have already heard of, if not have already read yourselves. However, I still thought it was worth sharing so you can kind of get to understand my book taste, and if you are new to reading or not a crazy big reader, it might still be useful to kind of see what other people are loving and what books are actually worth the hype, because as much as all these books are quite hyped up, I definitely do think they're all worth it. So without further ado, let's get into the books. So the first book that I ever rated 5 stars was Normal People by Sally Rooney. And if you've watched any of my books before, you'll know how much I absolutely love this book. I love the characters, I love the plot, I love everything about it. I think this is probably my favourite book of all time. However, I do really want to reread it this year because I want to see if it still holds up on the pedestal that I've put it on. This was one of the first books that I read when I kind of got back into reading, so I'm kind of curious to see how much I still love it, rereading it sort of 3 years on from when I first read it. This book is a literary fiction, but it has quite a heavy romance theme. I would still say it's definitely more of a literary fiction than a romance. However, there is this overarching romantic plot that kind of like follows through the entire book. And it follows 2 teenagers, Connell and Marianne, and they live in Ireland, and they are basically opposite ends of the spectrum in multiple different ways, because you have Connell, who's very popular and charismatic, and he's on the rugby team at his school, and he kind of has a lot going for him in that sense, whereas you have Marianne, who's a lot more reserved. She doesn't really have many friends, and she's actually quite condescending to the people that she goes to school with because she doesn't like any of them and they do bully her, so she just doesn't feel the need to kind of give them the time of day. And also both characters are kind of on opposite ends of the class spectrum as well, and this is actually shown very early on in the book, because I believe the first way that they kind of start a relationship together is because Connell's mum is actually the cleaner for Marianne's family. So even from the get-go, you can kind of see this class difference between the 2 characters. I can't exactly remember how it all starts, but they basically decide to have a bit of a friends with benefits situation where they basically just decide to hook up without actually committing to a relationship. And this suits both of them because they're both quite paranoid as to what other people would think, especially Connell, because he's very popular and his friends kind of actively pick on Marianne, and he's quite conscious about what they would think of him if they knew that he was dating her. So they decide to keep it a secret. And the book basically follows them throughout multiple years. So it follows them when they first initially start dating, when they're in high school, and then the 2 go to the same university, and it follows them as they kind of dip in and out of each other's lives. They have this kind of soulmate element to their relationship where they always find themselves drawn to each other and finding their way back to each other, which I personally absolutely loved. There's also quite a few heavy topics in this book as well, which I thought were looked at really well. One of the sort of subplots that I personally really enjoyed was Connell's experience at university, and that kind of shift from being in high school to going to university, as I think that is something that a lot of people struggle with. Connell is obviously very popular when he's in school, but when he goes to university, he really struggles to fit in and find that identity, especially because he kind of struggles with moving away from home and the kind of life that he's left behind there. The book also explores loneliness quite a lot because both characters kind of experience this idea of not really fitting in and this chronic loneliness of not really feeling like they can fully be themselves and feeling like they have to keep things back. And there's also a huge miscommunication trope in this book. That's why some people are so divided. Some people think that this book is really boring, and some people hate the fact that the two characters cannot communicate for the life of them. However, for me, I just found it quite realistic. I think especially at that age when you kind of are coming of age, you're insecure and you don't know if someone likes you the way that you think they like you. And I do feel like it's quite realistic to kind of not have those conversations, but I can understand why people get a bit frustrated with it. But I personally think that there's enough that's really amazing with the book that it really didn't bother me, and I did think the miscommunication trope was done well in this book, whereas I think in other books it's not done as well and it is more frustrating. But yeah, if you're looking for a coming of age literary fiction that has quite a heavy romantic theme to it, I definitely would look into this one. I personally really like the writing style. It's very easy to read. It's quite short as well. My copy is only 266 pages, so it's definitely the sort of book you could read quite quickly if you wanted just a short book. But yeah, it's the sort of book that some people say nothing really happens, but personally I feel like a lot does happen, and I do feel like the themes and the topics that it tackles are really interesting to kind of go into more depth and to explore. And it definitely is a book to get people talking, so I would definitely recommend this as sort of like a book club pick as well if you're kind of looking for a book to discuss with friends, because I do feel like some of the topics in the book are really interesting to then discuss. Also, it has been made into a BBC drama. I don't know how you can access it in other countries, but I know that in the UK you can access it on iPlayer. So if you do also want to watch the TV adaptation is so good. That's how actually a lot of people found it, was through the TV adaptation first and then the book. So this is one of the only things where I actually did watch the show before I read the book, but I still absolutely love the book. I do still think the book is worth reading. If this has been on your TBR or you've seen it floating around but you haven't picked it up yet, I would definitely recommend it if it sounds like this is something you'd really enjoy. The second book that I gave a 5-star rating to is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This book I absolutely love. It's a really, really well written memoir. This is another really short book. My hardcover copy is 304 pages, so I have a feeling the paperback copy would potentially be even shorter. This is a very easy to read book considering how heavy some of the topics are, because it's written very simply and to the point and with this sort of bluntness to it, which I personally really enjoyed. Also, the chapters are super, super short. I think some of the chapters are literally only a couple of pages long. So it's quite an easy book to kind of pick up for a couple of minutes or a few minutes and then put back down again. And it's also the sort of book that you can literally read in like a day or two. I think when we actually did end up reading this for my book club, and a lot of people read it within a day or two, and I think I read it in about 3 days. So yeah, it's definitely the sort of book that is quite addictive and bingeable, because you just can't believe that it's actually real and it's actually a memoir and based on real events, because some of it feels so extreme, but it is actually a true story. The book follows Jeanette McCurdy, and it talks about her introduction into child acting and her kind of introduction to Hollywood and fame, as well as her relationship with her mother throughout the years. So her mum was obviously someone who helped her get into child acting in the first place, and their relationship deteriorates very rapidly throughout her childhood and her teenagehood and going into adulthood. And as her mum passes away, she's left to kind of grapple with that grief and the experience of obviously not having that relationship that she wanted with her mother and how to process that. This book was absolutely fascinating. The family dynamic of her and her mother, as well as her siblings and her sort of grandparents and other people in her life, was really fascinating to read about. And some of the stuff that Jeanette goes through is absolutely horrifying and really upsetting. I would say a big trigger warning for bulimia, especially because that is something that's written about in quite graphic detail. If you have negative associations or experiences with bulimia, especially if you have emetophobia with vomiting, I would definitely avoid this book, because she does talk about vomiting quite graphically, so I can understand that would be quite a big trigger for you. If that is a topic that you might want to avoid, then maybe avoid this book in general, because it does talk about it in a lot of depth. But yeah, it is quite heartbreaking to see how Jeanette's life as a child actor and a kind of child star and her relationship to money and fame and going into that business is obviously very confusing when you're at a young age and you've got access to all this money and all these connections, and you don't really have people that are looking out for you in the way that they should be looking out for you. You don't have those kind of parental figures. I personally never watched iCarly or Sam and Cat, so you definitely don't need to have watched them to enjoy this memoir. However, I do feel like if you were a fan of those shows, it probably would be even better for you than it was for me, but you definitely don't need to be aware or knowledgeable on either of those shows to enjoy this book, because Jeanette really does take you through her entire life. I would say if you're looking for a new memoir to pick up, I would definitely recommend this one. It is really, really well written and it is very easy to read. It's very palatable considering how heavy some of the topics are, and it also has a kind of line of humour throughout the book as well, which is very much needed when you are kind of dealing with such heavy topics, but it's still comedic, it's very dry, it's kind of got that blunt sense of humour. And the audiobook is actually read by Jeanette McCurdy herself. However, I have heard some people say that whilst it's great that she reads the book herself, she does have a very dry delivery, so take from that what you will. You can always give the audiobook a try, but I read it on hardback and I personally really enjoyed it, so I think on paperback is completely fine for this book. But yeah, if you're into your non-fiction and you're looking for a new celebrity memoir, I would definitely recommend this one. The next book that I rated 5 stars was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, and this is probably my second favourite book that I've ever read. I absolutely adored this book when I read it, and it is a little bit longer. I think it's like 470 pages, so it's a little bit longer than the other books that I've recommended so far, but it's definitely worth it, especially if you're into your literary fiction. I would definitely recommend this one. If you've already read Normal People and you kind of like the idea of people coming in and out of each other's lives, then I would definitely recommend Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, because it kind of has a similar theme. However, this one is platonic rather than romantic, but it still kind of has that miscommunication trope and people that are always drawn to each other and really get on when they really get on, but understandably also fall out a lot because they kind of have this like connection that they don't have with anyone else. The book follows Sadie and Sam, and they basically become friends when they're children, both in a hospital together, and they bond over gaming, and then they kind of come into each other's lives again when they're at college and they decide to make a video game together. This is just one of those books where I feel like it's so well written and it's very, very plot heavy. So much happens in this book. I remember talking to my friends that were reading it, and I was like, oh, what part are you up to? And they were like, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened. And I was like, oh yeah, I forget that all happens in the first like 100 pages. It's a very plot heavy book, a lot does happen, but I do still feel like the characters are really well written, and I do feel like the characters are very in-depth. For me personally, because I love video games, that was also a little bonus that I feel like I just connected to it even more, because I absolutely adore video games, and obviously the two characters spend a lot of the book talking about video games, making video games, that sort of thing. It's obviously so much more than that. You don't need to be interested in video games at all to like it. However, it's just a nice touch if you kind of have that as an interest, because there are quite a few video game references and stuff like that, which I did really enjoy. This is another book that spans multiple years. So like I said, it starts with them as children and then follows them in college, and then it follows them after college as well. So it follows them throughout, I can't remember how many years in general, but I do have a feeling it's over like several decades. Even just like the college to adult bit, I feel like is over a couple of decades or something, I can't remember. But I do really love a book where you kind of follow characters over several years, because I just feel like a lot can change in those years, and your personality can change, your interests can change, your priorities can change, and I do really appreciate a book that kind of spans multiple years and multiple decades, because I feel like it's really interesting to see how those characters develop over that period of time. It's definitely the sort of book that I really do want to reread. I think this book and Normal People are the two books that are at the top of my list to reread, because I can't really remember every single thing that happened, but I remember when reading it, considering it's like almost 500 pages, I'm pretty sure I read it in the space of about 4 or 5 days. It was the sort of book I just absolutely binged. It's very addictive because you just want to know what happens next. And for me, the characters weren't exactly 100% likable, kind of like what I'd say with normal people. I wouldn't say the characters are the most likable people in the world because obviously they have their flaws, but I was just so intrigued and invested in their stories and invested in them as characters. I thought they were so well written, and I was just so invested to see what happened and where the story was going to go. But yeah, if you're looking for a literary fiction, you've probably heard of this book because it did go viral a few years ago. But yeah, if it's been on your radar but you've not yet picked it up, I definitely would recommend picking it up. I personally absolutely loved it, and if you like a book that spans multiple years and really has that strong sense of character identity, I would really recommend this one, because I do think books that just span multiple years, you really do get to spend so much time with those characters that you do feel like you really understand their identity and their wants and their needs, and I do feel like that's the case with this book. I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a new literary fiction pick. The next book that I rated 5 stars was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis, and this is another viral book again. I know you're probably thinking her taste is so basic, but I think these books are popular for a reason, and clearly I absolutely love them. This is another book that's actually recently been made into a TV show, and I'm yet to watch the TV show, but I do really want to watch it because I've heard good things. I've heard it's not as good as the book, but I have heard that it's still really good. This book is a historical fiction, and it's set in the 1960s America, and it follows Elizabeth Zott, who is a scientist, and she works in a lab with other scientists, but she receives a lot of misogyny, sexism, and kind of defiance from her peers. And I'm not going to spoil what happens, but essentially something happens which leads her to, I believe it's resign. I can't remember if it's fire or resign, but she resigns, and then she actually gets offered to have a TV show where she basically does like a Cooking Network TV show where she teaches housewives around America how to cook at home. It's very empowering, and the ending is a very sort of feel good. However, I would say there are some really heavy topics in this book, and I would not say it's a overall feel good book, because I did actually speak to a friend about this book. He was reading it. I can't remember when he was reading it, but he was reading it and he was like, oh yeah, I bought it on holiday because I thought it was this really feel-good book, and I'm right near the start and there's just been this really heavy scene and I don't really get how it's a feel-good book. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I wouldn't say it's a feel-good book. I mean, it feels good when you finish it. Like, it's the sort of book where you finish it and you just feel great. I think that's why I gave it a 5 star, because honestly the ending was so good. I was just on an absolute high, and there was so much about this book that I loved. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's completely feel good, because there are some really heavy topics, particularly around sexual assault and also grief. So yeah, I would know that going in because it's worth noting. I don't really want to spoil this book because I feel like it's kind of best to go in blind. I don't really want to tell you about certain aspects of the book because there are quite a few things that change as the book goes on, so I don't really want to spoil anything. But I would just say I really recommend it. If you're looking for a historical fiction that is very feminist and empowering, I definitely recommend this one. There's a reason that it's so popular. It's very easy to read. All these books that I'm recommending, one of the reasons I've rated them so highly is because they are very easy to read. I obviously don't mind a book that's a little bit more challenging. However, I do find with more challenging books, personally, I just struggle to binge them and get into them as much as I would like. And all the books that I'm recommending today are very easy reads. Like, I'd say if you're not a big reader, I would recommend any of these books. They're quite palatable and easy to read. And if you're kind of looking for something that, yeah, it's not going to be super challenging in terms of vocabulary and in terms of really complicated themes and language, I would recommend all of these books for that reason. But yeah, I don't really want to spoil too much of what happens, but if you're looking for a historical fiction and you've seen this floating around but you've not actually picked it up yet, I would definitely recommend. The final book I wanted to talk about today is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was the 5th book that I ever rated 5 star, and I actually did read this when I was on holiday and I just absolutely loved it. It's the perfect summer read, so now's a good time to think about reading it if you've got it on your shelf or you've heard about it, because this is absolutely like summer in a book. I absolutely loved this book. This book is another historical fiction and the main plot takes place in the 80s. I say main plot because there's technically two kind of plots going on. Not really, there's one main plot and then there's also a lot of flashbacks. The main plot of this book is every chapter is a new hour, and I believe we start at 7 a.m. in the morning. So the book takes place over 24 hours, that's the main bulk of the book, and then the rest of it is flashbacks. So for the first half of the book, I believe 7 till 7, after every chapter, you then get a flashback to kind of understand what happened before this night. And during the hours, you follow 4 siblings, and they are all these like rich, famous celebrities, and they're most famous for being surfers and models as well. I believe the eldest sister is a model. And you kind of join these siblings on each hour, and as the story progresses, especially with hour by hour, you realise that there's a lot of secrets between the siblings, and there's a lot that they're not telling each other, and there's a lot of personal feelings that they have about each other and have about things that are going on. And it's really interesting. If you like a book that is a little bit scandalous, is very like celebrity-esque, and kind of has that sibling dynamic, that family dynamic, I would definitely recommend this one, because this is very juicy and very scandalous, and I just absolutely loved it. It's set in the summer of 1983, and the 24 hours is all around a big party that the siblings are hosting, and they host this every single year, and it's a big celebrity party. So the kind of 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. is the build up to the party. You're meeting all the siblings, you're kind of getting all this information about who they're dating, what secrets they have, what's going on, and then the 7 p.m. onwards is the actual party itself, and that is just pure carnage where so much drama happens. You've got all these different celebrities, and yeah, it is so interesting and entertaining to read. I absolutely love this book. And yeah, like I said, it is a summer read because it is literally set in summer, so it's the perfect summer read. They're all surfers, they're models, it's just summer vibes on summer vibes because it's set in Malibu, obviously, because it's called Malibu Rising. In the flashbacks, you get a lot of context to their family history, and basically you literally go back to how their parents met and the relationship that they had and the upbringing that these kids had that then led them to being these sorts of celebrities now. And yeah, it is really interesting. It's just a very like juicy, scandalous book. It does have some like heavier topics as well, especially with that kind of like family dynamic, and the relationship they have with their father is quite complicated. So it still is quite an emotional book in parts. But yeah, if you're looking for a kind of like scandalous book that is very bingeable and definitely summer vibes, I would definitely recommend this one. It is historical literary fiction, so there is a few like romance subplots and stuff like that, but it's definitely more just on like the literary fiction side of things. But yeah, if you have heard anything about it, or if you've read any of Taylor Jenkins Reid's other books, I would definitely recommend this one. This is one of my favourite ones that she's written, and yeah, this is a great time to be recommended it because we're coming into summer soon, and this is definitely a summer book. I absolutely loved it. So yeah, those are all the 5 books that I wanted to talk to you about today. I know that a lot of them are very popular, so you've probably already heard of all of them, potentially even read quite a lot of them, or maybe even all of them. But if there's any you haven't read or any you haven't heard of, I really hope this does give you some recommendations. And I always say there's a reason that certain books are so popular, and yes, these are popular viral books, but I think they're popular for a reason. I personally absolutely love these books, and like I said before, I did find all these books very palatable and easy to read. So if you're in a bit of a reading slump, or you just want something that you know is going to be like an interesting read, I would definitely recommend any of these books because I personally loved all of them. So let me know if any of these books are also your favourites, and let me know if you're planning on picking any of them up after watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I will be making a part 2 when I find my next 5-star read, because that will be my 10th 5-star read. I will make a part 2 with the rest of my 5-star reads, and this will be a series I'll kind of continue going forwards. I really hope you enjoyed. As always, I do link my Goodreads and my Instagram in the description down below, so if you want to follow me on other platforms, do check me out on there. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll hopefully see you in my next one. Bye!